Wonderful. So really happy to welcome you all to this Q visit, which is all about Huddlecraft. And I'm going to let people do some proper introductions shortly, but just want to invite Zara to give you a wave. Zara is the CEO of Huddlecraft. And we've also got Holly Paris here, who has done some work with Huddlecraft before and is here representing her work in the NHS, in health. Couple of just really practical things to say. If you want to use closed captions, they are enabled, so you can turn those on. If you have any tech issues at all, you can just pop that in the chat and let us know, and we'll try and respond to that as quick as we can. We're going to have a break at around 10:45. But please do whatever you need to do across the course of the whole visit. You know, if you need to go and grab a drink, if you need to pop to the toilet, please feel permission to do that. Don't feel like you need to wait for 10:45 to look after yourselves. So absolutely do whatever you need to do. And the purpose of today's visit is to really immerse you in the organisation Huddlecraft, who specialise in peer-led approaches for learning and for change. And so hopefully all of you are here because you're interested in how to use peer-to-peer approaches to encourage different types of learning, different types of community building, different types of culture change within your organisational settings. And I just wanted to flag before we move on that you should have all received a pack over email where you've got in there the curiosity canvas, which I'll just flash up on the screen to remind you what that looks like. Hopefully this is going to come up. It looks like it's still loading. Here we go. There it is. So the curiosity canvas, this is in the PDF that we sent out to you over email. And the idea is for you to be able to use this as a prompt to capture learnings and reflections across the course of the visit. We'll have some explicit time at the end where you can capture some of those reflections. But if you're someone that likes to kind of scribble notes and capture things as you're going, it might be nice to have that out in front of you so you can be recording things that spark interest and spark learning. I think that's everything from me for now. Zara, anything you want to say before we do some welcoming?
No, just hello to everyone and nice to be here.
Great, thank you, Zara. So we're going to take some time now to welcome you into the space. And we are going to use a technique called a diversity welcome, which is from an organisation called Training for Change. We'll share the link with you afterwards. And we often use this in work with Huddlecraft because it specifically takes time to welcome and honour the different identities who are present within the space. So for the next few minutes, you're just going to hear Zara and I speaking, and I invite you just to take some time to absorb the welcome and to enjoy feeling the different parts of you be welcomed into the space. And sometimes we can find that the diversity welcome can be a surprisingly kind of tender experience for participants. So feel free just to do whatever you need to do to look after yourselves as you're listening to this. Welcome to people joining us from England, Scotland, Wales, and more specifically from Homerton, from Plymouth, from Staffordshire, from the Isle of Wight, from London, and anywhere else that you might be. Let us know in the chat if there's somewhere else where you're from.
Welcome to people of African descent, Black, South Asian descent, East Asian descent, Arab descent, European descent, those who identify as Latinx, and people of mixed and multiple descents as well.
I'd like to welcome people of all genders. This may include people who identify as women, as men, as trans, as genderqueer, as gender fluid, or others.
I'd like to welcome those that are queer, gay, lesbian, heterosexual, bisexual, pansexual, or others for whom none of the labels fit.
A really warm welcome to people with disabilities, visible or invisible. A warm welcome to all those who experience neurodivergence. We welcome the many ways in which you might see and experience the world.
We also want to welcome your bodies and the different ways you experience yours. And this might include chronic pain or strength or fatigue or tension. Whatever you are feeling is welcome.
Welcome to those of you in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s, your 60s, and all the ages.
And we also want to welcome your emotions this morning as well. A full spectrum of emotions, from joy to grief to contentment to disappointment and many more.
And on the note of joy, we welcome all the ways that you experience joy, through teamwork and collaboration, through taking inspiration from learning, from being in nature, your family life, to those of you that get joy from your quality improvement work, your friendships, your connections. We welcome those of you who experience joy through reading a really good book, and through sunshine, and through achieving things you didn't know you could do. We welcome those of you who experience joy from heavy metal, from making the complex understandable, from singing, from dancing, and from your animals. We welcome all of these unique and varied ways of experiencing joy, and all the other ways that we've not mentioned.
We also want to welcome in those who support you to be here this morning as well. We welcome your families, genetic and otherwise. And by the way, children, babies and pets are welcome in this space too, and we like to see them on the screen.
We welcome people with different faiths, different religious traditions, faith practices, private practices that don't belong to a tradition. We welcome agnostics, atheists, and seekers. We welcome our nature relations, who we sometimes forget and who we are always interconnected with. And I'd like to welcome those dear to us who have died. And lastly, I'd like to welcome our elders and ancestors, those here in this room, in our lives, those related to us and those who are not related to us as well. Thank you so much, everyone. A really warm welcome to all of the parts of you. And I know that might have felt a little bit different to the way you started Zoom sessions before. So I'd love to just invite you to just put a word or a sentence in the chat of how you found that. What was that like for you? Just give you a second to do that. Thanks, Madeline. Thanks, Helen. Refreshing, calming, welcoming. I'm really glad, Cleo. If it hadn't been, that would have been a bit awkward. Lovely, feeling connected, peaceful, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Keep those words coming. And please feel free to use the chat at any point. You know, if there's comments or reflections throughout the visit that you want to share, please feel free to do that. And if there are questions, we can feed that back into the visit at different points as well. So in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Zara and Holly to do a little bit of a kind of overview and introduction to Huddlecraft and peer approaches. And just before we do that, I wanted to share that I'm wearing 2 hats today, which I realised I didn't explain at the start. So I'm here on behalf of the Visits Collective. So I'm part of the team that are curating the visits for the Q community. But I also, in other worlds of my professional life, have done quite a bit of work with Huddlecraft, which is why I'm also sort of wearing the hat of helping to co-host the visit with Zara. So I'll be switching between those roles today. Zara, let me hand it over to you and let me know if there's anything you want me to do tech-wise.
Thank you. So, hi everyone, and I've really enjoyed this prompt of a virtual visit, which feels a little bit different to the usual brief, which might just be to explain Huddlecraft and what we do. But I am just going to start with 5 or so minutes now of just explaining who we are to ground us, and then there'll be more things that we're going to do later and different activities along the way. So I will share some slides with you as well. So hopefully everyone can see that. So welcome to your visit to Huddlecraft, and a warm welcome as well from the whole of the Huddlecraft team, who I am representing by being here today. We are a small but mighty team of 4. And Huddlecraft really exists because we know that the collective learning curves that we face as people over the next decade and beyond are very steep. There's a lot that needs to change if we are to create a civilization where our children and their children are going to continue to be able to thrive. And so we exist as an organization to tackle steep learning curves together, and to do that collectively. That's what we're all about. And so our fundamental belief as an organization is that people can learn to thrive together on our finite planet. We believe that that is possible. And we also know that human potential to learn is infinite. And so we think that we should be unearthing more of that potential as much as we possibly can, so that we can tackle these collective learning curves together. And we have seen in our work how huddles, which is our term for peer groups, so small groups of co-learners, we have seen how these constellations of people can unearth potential that people aren't able to unearth on their own as singular learners. But in order to do that, craft is required to make that work. And so that's what we do. It's all in the name. Huddles are all about coming together as a group, and craft is all about exercising skill in making something. And that is our craft. That is what we specialize in. And over the last 6 years that we have been up and running, we have done lots of huddles, many of which you can see here. I still prefer to use this slide, even though over the past few years, most of the groups look more like the one at the bottom there, where people are in a grid of squares on a screen, because we've been doing a lot more work online. But bringing people together in groups is something that we have done many, many times. And always experience the power of that in different ways. The other part of our organization or our business is that we then learn from all of those huddles that we've run, and we take that learning and we bring it into partnership with organizations that we work with. So they have a purpose or a challenge or something that they want to achieve as an organization. And we bring our understanding of peer-led learning and change to that challenge or to their objectives. So, for example, the middle square here, when we were working with Government Digital Service, it was all about content designers who create gov.uk, and how can we really upskill those content designers in what is actually quite a new discipline. And we brought peer-led learning to that challenge. And we use an analogy to think about these small groups, these huddles, these peer groups. And we find this analogy really helpful for people, especially when they're encountering the work that we do for the first time. And that is the analogy of a microclimate. So in this image, you can clearly see that there's a microclimate in this valley, presumably because there is water collecting at the bottom there. And so things are able to grow in that space at the bottom that can't grow on the sides of those hills, or might not grow in the rest of the environment. And when we bring together groups of people, we are thinking about how can we create a social or a cultural microclimate where it's possible for people to grow something in that space that would be harder for them to grow in the rest of their organization or their life or their work or whatever. And so we have this image which we think of as, you know, the white kind of shapes here being maybe the boundary of an organization or of a community, and then the colorful clusters of people being a huddle or a peer group of people within that, creating a microclimate, different social, cultural conditions within a wider organization or a wider network or community. And we do base our work on evidence as well. And so we particularly love a piece of research that shows that when people are by themselves and looking up at a hill, they actually see that hill as steeper than it really is in reality. If you then give them a backpack, a heavy backpack to wear and put on their back, they will then see the hill as even steeper than that. But then if you bring trusted friends, trusted relationships, people that they know, and those people stand next to them, their perception, even when wearing that backpack, will switch back and they will perceive the hill to be less steep than it is. And that is sort of at the heart of the work that we're trying to do. And then we're also very interested in examples from nature and when peer-to-peer learning happens in nature. So this image shows a dolphin that has learned to use a shell as a tool for catching fish. And this isn't something that dolphins teach from parent to child. It's something that has been passed from peer to peer. And what happens is when dolphins are living in a less stable environment, when their environment is destabilizing, they start to learn peer-to-peer in that way. And so at Huddlecraft, we're really interested in the uncertain conditions that we're living within, what might be coming over the next decade, and what peer-to-peer learning really has to offer in terms of a competitive advantage or a way of spreading innovation. So I will stop there for now and pass to Holly, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Holly, would you want to introduce yourself and just share a little bit your connection to Huddlecraft and yeah, the value you see it bringing to your own work in health?
Thank you, Kate. So my name's Holly Paris. I'm a GP by background, and just under 2 years ago, I set up a care home service in Weston-super-Mare, which is a bit of a basket case of an area, actually. And just to add some background into that, Weston's got one of the largest concentrations of care homes in the UK, and is one of those places that's incredibly difficult to recruit to through historic underfunding. And I think we were in a position during the pandemic where the viability of some of our care homes was at threat. And being somebody who's a change maker, I decided that we needed to perhaps approach the way that we look after care homes quite differently, given the scale of the problem that we had in terms of not being able to deliver quality care. And I asked if we could set up a care home service. And in doing that, realised that my biggest challenge actually was going to be able to find the people to actually deliver that care. So having had the principle agreed, staffing that model actually was the thing that frightened me most. And I'm just a normal person. And I think what we managed to do was create some interest in doing something new. And a couple of people raised their hands and said they'd like to join in and help with this project. And we started the care home work in earnest, just putting the basic things in place. And very quickly, something went wrong, because that's what happens really when you've got no roadmap and no plan and you're making it up as you go along. Something goes wrong. And by this time, my team was of 7 people, and I had to address with one of the members of staff that there was a significant event surrounding something that they'd done. And I don't think I was quite prepared for the backdraft that came with that, because all in one go, I realised just how burned some of my staff were from previous experiences of having to look at what they'd done when something had gone wrong. And this is where I saw what psychological safety needed to be in action. I think part of the fear here was probably due to the fact that people were perhaps pushing boundaries beyond their normal comfort zones and being asked to perhaps act up into positions where they wouldn't normally be. And the reason they were having to do that was because actually we didn't have high levels of skills in the care of older people within our group, or at least I didn't think we did. So I embarked on some training with Huddlecraft because I happened to see it was happening around the same time this group had been set up. And I thought to myself, we've got no choice really but to institute a culture of peer-to-peer learning because there's nobody to teach us. We've got to teach ourselves. And using this example then of a significance events analysis discussion, that was the learning question actually I had going into the training. It was, how do I make what's traditionally been a horrible thing to do something that empowers people to actually make change, improve and boost quality of what they do and be proud of the work that they're undertaking. And so that's what happened. And the project that we did actually just re-established how we deal with significant events. And the peer-to-peer learning wrapped around that. And in fact, actually what I then didn't expect was the peer-to-peer learning would start to evoke a cascade of learning across the team. The team cohesion that came from that experience actually was just something I don't think I've ever seen in action before. The team developed such a lot of trust. They were connected. And actually, you know, having seen them power through something that was a problem and solve it for themselves, they then started finding other problems that they wanted to solve. And lo and behold, actually, we'd started to create not just a team of people who had imposter syndrome, but actually emerging experts in the field of care home work. And 18 months later, I've got a really confident bunch of 16. And how did Huddlecraft help me with that? I think in a number of ways, actually. I think some of the things that we were doing were obvious. And what happened when I came to some training with Huddlecraft is I began to realise that none of this was highfalutin degree level stuff. It's the stuff we do every day. And what I got given here was a framework for the stuff that made sense. I got some help in looking perhaps at some of the things I hadn't thought of. And I think most importantly, I had developed perhaps a language to be able to talk about how to power up a workforce to my peers, because actually none of them really understood what we were doing. So finding a language to describe this type of working was incredibly useful. And I have to say, this has probably been the most formative learning experience of my career. And they're not paying me to say that, actually. I'm here of my own volition. And I've cancelled a very important high-level meeting that I was supposed to be chairing to be here, because actually that's what it means to me. So that's my story. And I could tell you a lot more really about the smaller aspects of how this has affected our team. But actually, I think just knowing where I started with this and how useful it's been would be a good place to open this training up.
Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you for giving that introduction. I'm very glad you cancelled your important meeting that you're meant to be chairing to be here. Lucky us. And there's so much you said there that I think we'll be picking up on throughout this visit, that piece around finding the experts everywhere rather than seeing that being situated at the top or with one particular person. So yeah, really appreciate you bringing that lens. And a little bit of context about the training that Holly mentioned. This was a partnership between Huddlecraft and the NHS Southwest Leadership Academy, who offer all sorts of training to different NHS staff. So we had a cohort of people working in different NHS organisations across the Southwest, some of them clinicians, some of them working in administrative roles, but all thinking about how do we use the power of peer to bring about shifts in the way we are working, the quality of care that we're giving to people, the types of thinking and learning that we're doing, which I'm really hoping is what you're going to take away today. So we've all been doing lots of talking and you've been doing lots of listening. So we want to give you a chance to connect with each other. So I want to invite you just to think about this question that I'm going to pop in the chat. would love to invite you to think of a really strong group or a community that you are a member of. What's the purpose that you hold together with the other members of that group or community? And what attributes of that group or community make it a really strong group in your opinion? This doesn't have to be work related. This could be the knitting group you go to every Wednesday. You know, there's no kind of parameters really for thinking about the type of group or community you're part of. But I just want to give you a minute on your own to think about that before we move into discussing it. So just a minute to reflect on that and make any notes for yourself. Last 20 seconds or so. Okay. So we're going to place you in breakout rooms with a couple of others. I know a couple of you have already told me that you're not able to join breakout rooms. That's absolutely fine. You can ignore the invite when it pings up on your screen. And you're going to have 10 minutes together to take a moment to introduce yourself and say hi, and then to share your reflections on this question. So what is the strong group or community you've been part of? What's that purpose you've held together? And what are the attributes that make it a strong group in your opinion? So 10 minutes to have those conversations, and I'm opening up the rooms now. Welcome back. The others are just on their way back from the breakout room. Welcome back, welcome back. Welcome everyone. I'd love to invite you to share in the chat a group or community that you heard about that now you're like, I want to join that one. That sounded great. I'll sign me up for that. I'd love to get a little flavour of what were the groups and communities you were hearing about. Bit of yoga, an orchestra. Love that. Bit of music. Okay, Amy's orchestra is getting 2 votes so far, guys. So clearly that's the one. Oh, lovely. Nice. Lots of interesting groups spoken about. So keep all of that in mind as we carry on thinking about the different types of peer-to-peer approaches, which we're going to do a little bit later on after the break. Keep in mind the things you talked about, the qualities and the attributes that you shared that give you those groups and communities you're part of a real sense of definition. But for now, I'm going to hand back to Zara, who is going to do a little bit of a tour of Huddlecraft. In lieu of being in person, Zara's put together a virtual tour of the organisation. And again, Zara, let me know what you want me to do tech-wise.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kate. And I think, yeah, it's less the tech and more, please keep me to time. That would be very, very helpful. So let me share my screen again with you. Here we go. Can everybody see that? Yes.
Yes.
Like great. So yeah, we're going to go on a virtual tour of the Huddlecraft building, and building in inverted commas, because actually we are a remote team and the way that we work is very distributed. We have a core team of 4, as I mentioned before, but we work with lots of other people in lots of different locations. So I'm going to show you around this map of the different things that we do and the different people we're connected to and how they all fit together. So I'm going to zoom us in to begin with. So I think I've given some shape to this already in the introduction, but as a kind of a recap, there are really 3 aspects actually of what we do as an organization. So firstly, we are a platform, and by that I mean that we support people to host and join huddles, so these purposeful pop-up peer groups. And we are a platform in the sense that we offer training and support and resources to people who can then design and run their own huddles and have agency over that process. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. We are then a studio, and so we partner with organizations like an agency, essentially, to apply the power of peer-to-peer dynamics to their challenges. And again, I will show a little bit more about that in a minute. And then also we are a community. So the people who come through our programs often identify as lifelong learners. And the people who host our programs or some of our work are also part of the community as a community of practice, really. So to keep developing their Huddlecraft. So let me take you on a little journey around, starting with this platform aspect of what we do. So we have a key program of activity that is called the Host Fellowship, and we run it once every 2 years, and we bring together a cohort of who we call hosts, but essentially facilitators who are going to design, launch, recruit, and then run their own huddle, their own peer group. And so through the Host Fellowship, those people set up huddles. So you can see these huddles sparking off from the Host Fellowship. And if I zoom in, I can show you some of the many variety of different themes. They seem to be a little bit blurry, but I'll highlight a few. So we've got one huddle at the moment called Power Trip, which is all about people exploring their relationship to power and how that plays into their work. We've got one here, and we've got Maria on the call, actually, who is the host of this huddle, one called Living the Good Life, which is all about people exploring leisure and their relationship to leisure and how they can bring more of that into their day-to-day and their routine. We've got a huddle for mothers to come together and support one another, new mothers to support one another in the early stages of their motherhood journey. And I'm going to highlight this one down here as well, which is for white men to explore how to go beyond patriarchy in the way they're relating to others and to the world. So huddles can be used for a really wide variety of different things, and that kind of flexibility is part of what keeps it really fascinating for me, at least. And then in terms of a tour, here's a world map which shows some of the locations where huddles have taken place. So across the UK, as you can see here, in Berlin in Germany, in North America, Canada, and also in Brazil as well. So that's been really fun to see this apply in different places, different cultural contexts. And so the structure of this Host Fellowship looks a little bit like this. So there's 4 of us at the bottom in the center who are the team, the core team. And then we work with a bunch of people in these clusters out to the side who act as mentors. Those people mentor the people who are hosting the huddles. Those people hosting the huddles recruit and connect a peer group of people around them. So there are sort of layers out, but we are all staying in relationship and connected to one another through these mentoring and hosting relationships. And so we think a lot about what we call our nervous system and how information is flowing around, flowing through the different people and coming back to us into the team as well, so that we know what's going on in huddles and what experiences people are having, and what we need to change and improve as well. And then a lot of people who host our huddles also join our freelance collective. So this loops us back to the bottom here. So we work as a team, but then we have a wider team of freelancers as well. And we're also based in different parts of the UK, London, Birmingham, Bristol, Devon being some of the key locations. And then if I back up to the studio again here, so we partner with a really wide variety of organizations in lots of different sectors. And I think that speaks again to the real flexibility of this approach and how it can apply in many different contexts. And in the studio, we embark on these different projects, some of which are short-term and time-bounded, and then others which go on to continue. So we have a project called Money Movers, which Kate is actually going to tell you a bit more about later on. But that's a project where we're using peer support and peer learning to help women to move their money for the planet. So tangibly to move their pension, move their current account, divest from fossil fuels, put their money in a place where it's going to be supporting a future that they actually want to see in the world. And so that started as a small project. It's now a larger project. And we think very likely it might need to spin out of the organization and become its own entity at some point. And so then we've got our community over here. So co-learners and Huddlecraft practitioners. And we do a variety of things here, which seem like nice things, you know, like we run a co-created annual retreat. There are people gathering over here. But actually this is really important for our work, because this is how we stay in touch with people. This is how we build relationships. This is how we find projects. This is how we learn. So all of this activity we do see as really important for our work, not an added extra. We all connect together in our Slack space so that the community can continue between the events that we run. And we also run a lot of online events as well, because as you've seen, we are dotted around the world. So that's a little whistle-stop tour of the virtual building. And I also wanted to show you these two. So another way we think about how all of this fits together is that there's a really symbiotic relationship between the studio work, the collaborations that we do, and the huddles, which we see as our roots of practice. So that's where we're absorbing the learning. And then in the studio, that's where we're photosynthesizing, essentially bringing money and resources into the organization so that this whole system can continue. And we also sometimes think about mushrooms and mycelia. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but the mycelia being the white stuff in the soil below the mushrooms, this interconnected web that allows the mushrooms to fruit and pop up above the surface. So we think of our activity as working in the soil underneath so that these huddles can pop up in different places for different purposes. So I'll stop sharing again and ask if there are any questions. Kate, have there been any in the chat, or anyone is very welcome to just shout their question out as well?
Yeah, no questions yet, just some excitement for Brazil being represented.
I've got a question, if that's all right. It's Emma here. That sounds amazing and very exciting. So I was just wondering, do you find that people that are trained to facilitate huddles need to have sort of any prerequisites or values or attitudes or anything, or can anyone, can you transform them to be amazing facilitators of huddles despite what values and attributes they might have to start?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are some foundational things which mean that somebody would be well placed to play the role of a host. Although I think it's also important to say that huddles can come in lots of shapes and sizes. So some of the ones I was showing at the beginning there, the huddle for mums, the huddle for white men, those all tend to be about 6 months long. So it's quite a large commitment and quite a big commitment for the host. Whereas with Money Movers, the Women Climate Finance project that I mentioned, the huddles within that project are really light touch. So they're a smaller group who meet only 3 times together. And so I think there are greater requirements of who the host might be when the commitment is larger and more involved. But in general, I would say the real foundation is, I think a host needs to be really interested in people and really like working with people, because if they don't, the people dynamics, which are going to come up in that group space when you're trying to operate non-hierarchically, build trust, you know, when maybe conflict or different perspectives are coming together, if you don't enjoy that process, then it's going to feel probably like a burden. So I think that's the fundamental prerequisite. I think if someone has facilitation skills, that's great, but that can all be taught and acquired if that interest in people is there.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I'd also add that I think there's something about when you're hosting a peer group, there's a real emphasis on a distribution of power, and that's kind of a real core part of what makes it effective. So I guess if you're someone that wants to be, you know, the person with all the power or the expert in the room, then there's going to be a resistance probably to the innate nature of what it means to be in a peer group. And I would say that in my experience of hosting different peer groups and bringing people together, there's always further down that spectrum you can go. Even if, you know, as someone, I might feel like, oh, I'm really good at bringing people together and distributing that power, but there's always a humility I leave with in terms of understanding the extent to which I can learn about that and reflect on that. So yeah, I would add that, Zara, to what you said. And we probably need to move on to the next section just to flag that.
Yeah, great. And someone's asked in the chat, any tip sheets for facilitation? So we do have a bunch of public resources actually, which we'll share a link to that later on, and you might find some things in there. Okay, I'm going to share again so that we can look at the next section of this. So,
and just to say, if more questions are coming from what Zara shared so far, feel free to ping them in the chat, and we can come back to them as and when.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kate. So now I'm going to take you through a week in the life of Huddlecraft. And so this is an imaginary week that I've put together that draws on a lot of the rhythms and patterns and regular meetings and types of activities that we have. And I think the kind of the point that I suppose I wanted to make by describing this is, I think this shows how we are trying anyway to live the culture of learning and change that we encourage others to have. And that isn't always easy. And often when we work with people and that's something that we're encouraging, they will say, you know, it's really hard to prioritize that and it's really hard to have the time. And that is, of course, true for us as well. So let me start on Monday. That would be the logical place to begin. Some of these coming up a little bit blurry. That's a shame, but never mind.
Do you want to try and refresh, or do you want me to share it and see if it's
shall I try and refresh? Let's give that a go.
The connection's a little bit fragile at points. Nothing bad, but I wonder if it's that.
Yeah. If it's no better when I refresh, maybe I will ask you to share it, Kate, in case that improves it. Because they were nice and crispy when I... Oh, there you go. That is actually a bit better, isn't it?
Yeah, that's much better.
Cool. Okay, so let's try with that. So yeah, Monday mornings, we always start with a team check-in together, and we have Monday morning emojis to describe our capacity and how that is feeling for the week ahead. And we have these categories that you can see here. So very often, lots of us are feeling like an octopus, aka juggling a lot of different things during the week, being a small team. But it's really great to see amongst the team when somebody says, I'm a rock this morning, other people can lean on me this week, or I'm a lion, I'm feeling strong. And so, you know, we can see where there's sort of strain and also where there might be a bit more capacity or a bit more space to help everyone else. So that's a useful rhythm that we have, and we do that every week. We then, as I was describing before, we have this network of hosts who are in lots of different places around the country who are at different times running their huddles. And so of an evening, there may well be a huddle meetup. And this is one that is particularly photogenic and therefore good to show, where a huddle was meeting on Brighton Beach together. So met before sunset and then stayed together after sunset, and sat around the fire there. And so the rhythm varies a lot. And then moving to Tuesday. So yesterday actually was a Tuesday, and we hosted one of our Huddlecraft open lunch and learn sessions. So this is something that we try to do every other month or so across the year. And it serves a few purposes, because it helps people find out about our work, but it also helps the team to continually articulate what we do in a simple way for people to understand. And that's open to anyone who wants to join. We then also, on a similar rhythm of every other month roughly, tend to do a themed online event. And this is one of our learning rhythms. You know, there are lots of topics within the broader topic of peer-to-peer learning and change that we want to learn more about, and that we want to connect with other people who have developed expertise or experience in that area. So this is an example of one that is coming up next week, I think, where the theme is learning tribes and how people can develop their own learning communities and weave those. And we've got some speakers for that. And then moving on to Wednesday, every Wednesday morning for our community, so everyone who is together in our Slack channel, we have an open learning hour. It's a really, really simple structure that we do every Wednesday. So you come, you check in, you say what you're going to learn, you spend 45 minutes doing that, whether it's reading a book, reading an article, listening to a podcast, watching a YouTube tutorial, whatever it might be. And then everybody checks out at the end with what they've learned. Then we're very often running our Huddlecraft 101 training. So this is one of our sort of key offerings. We run it twice a year, in May and in November as well. And it's a series of online sessions that dive a lot deeper into peer-led approaches and how to apply them to different challenges. And so of an afternoon, then normally after lunch, we will often be hosting online in the same way that I'm doing now. Then we've got Thursday, and we've gone a little bit blurry again, but usually during the week we will be hosting a workshop for one of our studio projects. So they're not always in the room, sometimes they're online, but that sort of delivery is a regular part of what we're doing. And then maybe I'll try and refresh again so that we can see. Oh, that was much quicker that time.
And if not, I can, there you go, that's much better.
Yes. So at the end of the week, because what we work is a 9-day fortnight, so we have every other Friday off as a whole team. So at the end of the day on a Thursday, we have an automated message that pops up that invites all of the team to check out and share some wins that they have had work related that week. Also something that's happened which has been great for them personally, something that's a challenge that they're dealing with work, and what they're up to on the weekend. So that helps us connect as a remote team and sort of stay in touch, but also helps us all have visibility over, you know, what's been going on that week if we haven't connected with everybody. And so in this imaginary week that I'm showing you, it's a Friday on, so it's a Friday that we're working, and we tend to spend a lot of time together as a team, either online or in person on Fridays. And we have a longer team meeting here where we address tensions and things coming up. We have open space to use as needed. And then we have something that we call Stewie sessions, which are essentially a peer coaching space. So instead of having line managers, we are peer coaches to one another. So I have a coach and I also coach someone else, and that's the same for everybody. And we do that on a monthly basis. And then sometimes we do have things going on the weekend as well. So we might have a community gathering happening on the weekend, or we might have a work engagement, something going on the weekend as well. So for example, this was Annika from our team speaking at a TEDx event on a Sunday. And so, yeah, the rhythm here every Sunday, but not really, because that's only happened once. So yeah, that's a week in the life of Huddlecraft. And I wonder if there are any more questions that we can take now.
Can I also just say that was perfectly timed? You're bang on.
Oh, great. Unusual for me.
Yeah, really curious what questions come up for people having seen, you know, that week in the life. Yeah, Madeline, go for it.
Thank you. I loved seeing that week. I guess my question is, it feels like as an organization, you're, I guess, holding a lot of space for things to emerge and evolve, like the way you do things, as well as like what you learn about peer groups and how to support them to run effectively and stuff. But at the same time, it does also feel like you prioritize kind of like documenting things and maybe systematizing things where you can. And I guess in my head, maybe it doesn't feel like this. In my head, it feels like those two things might be in tension, that you're trying to like make things tangible and concrete, but also leaving room for them to evolve. And I guess, yeah, I'm a bit of a control freak. So I'm wondering, how do you handle that? Like, yeah, what does that look like in the team?
I actually think as a sort of a meta reflection to that question, that tension between structure and emergence is a really key part of peer learning and organizing people in this way, because what it certainly isn't, that can be what people expect, is that you just get a group of people together and like, boom, they collaborate really well, you know, they exchange stuff as peers. And actually a lot of structure is needed for people in a peer group in order for them to navigate all of the value and all of the resources that they have there. Because in traditional learning, one of the key reasons why I think that teacher-student dynamic has sustained to such a great extent is because of the simplicity of that model, because everybody knows who they should look at in order to take value away. And so when you have a peer group, you then have multiple people who you buy into the idea that they can offer you some value, and navigating that is inherently more complex. And so, yeah, there's a real need for structure to enable that, in order that the emergent potential and the generative potential of those different perspectives and those people can come together. So yeah, I think there's something really interesting in what you're asking about that. And then I think, yeah, as a team on a sort of weekly basis, absolutely, those things can be in tension. And also, you know, we are a small team in a small organization. And so there is strain sometimes, and there are difficult periods where it's hard to prioritize some of this stuff. And I think the idea of systematizing things is also one where we need to kind of bottle some of our methodology and what we do and be able to share that, But I think we also feel quite a lot of pressure to be developing new things all the time as well, because that can also be what people come to you to work with you for. And so, yeah, that can be intention as well. I'm not sure if I fully answered your question, but I feel like there's loads in there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. Karen, and also hi, Karen.
Yay. Hi, Kate. I'm sorry I've just turned my camera off. It had a little bit of a weird thing that happened, so I'll turn it back on, and if it happens again, I'll turn it off. Yeah, lovely to see you. My question kind of follows on from Madeline's, thinking about the need for structure to try and hold some of those distributed processes in place really well, and wondered, that sort of time pressure where people, I mean, do you keep to that religiously? Has that been easy for people to grasp and to hold? Or is it something that somebody goes, oh yeah, we meant to check out, but actually I've just got to dash off this morning and I can't make that, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it is the latter for sure. So I think even in the screenshot I showed was an example of a checkout where it was 2 out of 4 team members had answered it that week. So I think what we're usually trying to achieve is like a critical mass, like enough of a response rhythm across all of us as a team, rather than a kind of a strict regime that then, becomes onerous for people. And yeah, over time, we have tried to develop the rhythms so that they're really forgiving. So like the learning hour is a really great example of that, where we've tried out lots of different events for our community in the past where they're more based on us offering them content, but then it's a really big ask for us to pull that together every single time. But what the learning hour means is that we can show up, we can open the space, we can have the check-in, and then actually if I've got a deadline and I'm not going to listen to a podcast for the next 45 minutes, I can do whatever I need to do, and that's the same for everybody else as well. And so yeah, we've tried to sort of lean toward, I guess, forgiving rhythms.
Yeah, that's a nice word. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And Zara, I wonder if the question we were going to invite for discussion, I wonder if we share that and just take a couple of responses before we break. How does that feel?
Yeah, that sounds good.
We were really curious to hear from all of you. One of the things that I always think is really interesting about Huddlecraft is that they are an organisation who are dedicated to helping other organisations and other people live learning, but they're also trying to do stuff, as you've just seen through that week of their life, to really live and breathe that learning culture. And so I was curious to hear, how that resonates for you in your own organisations and the own context you're working in. In which ways are you living a learning culture at your organisation? How is that achieved? How might it be strengthened? I'm curious what's coming up for all of you as you think about your own organisations, listening to Zara talk about Huddlecraft, and maybe we can just hear from a couple of people before we go to a break. Who would like to kick us off?
I can jump in if you like.
Great, thanks, Emma.
So the reason that I'm jumping in is because that's part of like what my job is around improving learning and innovation, and mostly around the behavioural elements in the organisation, because we're quite good at providing learning, as in, training is obviously a big thing. You don't want people messing with your water. And so even from a regulatory point of view, that's always been a priority. But I think now we're learning that the foundations and maybe the roots that you referred to, Zara, need to be strengthened. And so doing a lot of work in terms of supporting psychological safety and developing our leaders in psychological safety, and revisiting, I think somebody had mentioned in our breakout around sort of investigations or incidents. No, actually, sorry, it was Holly that talked about incidents and how they are investigated. And so looking at it through a psychological safety and human factors lens, I guess. So looking at these kind of roots that are needed to build trust, because at the moment in our communities, we have a lot of belong communities, which are great and support the diversity of our employees, but there's not people don't feel safe to speak out and share their opinions because in the past that's been not looked on kindly. So I guess that's a process, isn't it, of building trust, and that's where we really need to focus, and why we're interested in Huddlecraft and these ways to kind of build trust across communities rather than in places where people don't feel that sense of belonging to start with. So I guess working with fertile ground.
Thank you, Emma. And yeah, what strikes me as you're saying that is this idea of like going at the pace of trust, and that sometimes the pace at which trust can be built might be slower than the pace at which the work is required, and how you negotiate that tension.
Yeah, and also that we work with scientists and engineers that are used to building things and making things. And so if you have the concept of a huddle where the outcome might be learning, emergence, peer learning is the emergent property of that, it's a lack of buy-in to that. So I think it's then creating the structure around it where there's something tangible that people can see, a thing that they've co-created.
Yeah, and the value being not just on the output but also on the process, and that being equally as valuable. Yeah, I really hear that. Any other reflections from anyone around the ways you're living a learning culture in your organizational context? Anything else coming to mind for anybody? Yeah, Sinead, go for it.
Hi there. I suppose I've come from the health service executive into a lecturing role, but I suppose my main interest is in applied psychology, and my main research interest would be in building up our health service again and building it up in terms of peer-to-peer support. And I suppose reflecting on COVID and a lot of what happened, frontline workers, there's a lot of work to be done. And I suppose I'm particularly looking at injecting compassionate leadership back into the health service from the top down, which is no easy task. So a lot of buy-in is required, at senior level. And as the previous speaker, Emma, I think it is mentioned about psychological safety, that's extremely important. And I suppose the domain of compassionate leadership, we are supposed to be a compassionate organisation, yet we're firefighting and have lost the compassion because, we can only do what's absolutely necessary. And that often involves a lot of structure, a lot of policies, procedures, guidelines, and the compassion and the caring element has been pushed to the side. So that's effectively what's happened. And that's what needs to do full circle again. So I suppose, when I heard of Huddlecraft and peer-to-peer, I suddenly thought that could be very interesting. So.
Thank you, Sinead. Zara, sorry, do you want to come in response?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to something in both of what Emma and Sinead were saying, where I think a lot of the time when we at Huddlecraft talk about this stuff, we really are talking about psychological safety and learning and those things as outcomes, relationships as outcomes, because that's what we are interested in. But then often when we are collaborating with an organization, for example, it might be that they are actually really interested in something more technical or something more specific or something more tangible. And sort of that can work really well too. So I think the money movers example that we gave there, we're moving money and measuring how much money has been moved. And so people actually engaged with that process to move money. Whereas with some of the other huddles, they might engage because they want to form connections or relationships in their life. And so I think there's something important, especially if you are thinking about how to use it strategically at, at leadership level or whatever, is finding the right purpose that's really going to resonate with people rather than expecting them to have to buy in to the process before they've experienced it.
I think you could probably use the, the positive deviance approach there as well, and not maybe call it compassionate leadership, but something else.
Yes. Yeah.
Sure. I can see there's 2 more comments, so we'll take those 2 and then we're going to go to a break. Is it Aisha? Have I said that correctly?
Yes, it's Aisha.
Aisha.
Thank you. I think so. I'm a rheumatology senior trainee. I'm approaching the end of my training to become a consultant, and I more than doubled the number of years in training for childcare reasons and taken time out of program. So part of the advantage of that is rotating from one organization to the other, and I think one of the hinders of developing and learning organizations is something I learned over the years is system blindness. So when you work in a blind system where essentially from top down, like they see just one dominant culture doesn't need to be only, you know, our own culture, but actually the culture, the way how the organizations run, then you get used to just one way in one approach, and you lose sight seeing other sides of the organization, where you can create opportunities for collaborations and therefore increasing the potential for the organizations to grow. So I think one thing that probably to enable that cultural shift in the learning organizations is there must be like way, how can we get people to connect to each other's, but most importantly, point to each other's blindness, because we are all blind in the same system. We're all seeing part of the system, but if we can enable that kind of relationship along with psychological safety to challenge each other's in a way that we can point, oh, we actually had a great conversation about this topic, but we miss this particular person or this particular member of the team who can add lots of insights and knowledge. So I think to enable cultural shift, we do need to enable system sites, and to enable system sites, you need a leadership team that enable collaborations and getting people together. And to get people together, the first step is to learn about each other's and our values, who we are, what are our cultures, what are our histories, and how can we work together.
That's fascinating. I've never heard of that phrase of system site before, but I don't know, I mean, if any of you, I don't think I showed it on the slides actually, but our logo at Huddlecraft is like a little man with multiple heads, and that's that idea of sort of coming together and actually having the perspectives of all of those other people so that you can see yourself through their eyes, but also so you can look outwards through those multiple perspectives as well.
In system blindness, you adhere to one predominant culture, and people start to become more reflexive. So they reflect and say, oh, that person is different, something wrong with the person, rather than, oh, I'm actually curious to know about that person. So it is kind of developing that responsive way of how we see the difference in each other's as an opportunity to learn from each other, as, oh, excluding those who look different or who behave differently.
Thank you so much. Matt?
Yeah, well, Aisha has just covered, well, pretty much what I was going to say, or part of what I was going to say, in a different sort of way, in that since COVID, and everybody, certainly in my organisation, we've gone from everybody working in offices or hospitals or whatever to certainly most of the non-clinical staff are now working from home, distributed and what have you. There's been an erosion of culture. So Aisha was talking about having that system blindness and having that culture where everybody's the same mindset. Well, there's been an erosion of that in a way in our organisation, and one of the things that my team has been looking at is ways that we can not bring back a culture of that sort of insular, this is the way we think and we frown upon anyone else thinking differently, but to bring back the water cooler moments, if you like. How do we do that with a distributed workforce? If we're all in an office and we go to make a cup of tea, and we're in the kitchen making a cup of tea, and then somebody from another department comes in, or another team comes in and starts making their lunch or whatever, and you have that conversation. Oh, how you doing? Oh, it's been terrible, and we're working on this, and suddenly you're having a conversation about something that would never have happened. And from that, they can quite often be collaboration come out of those chance meetings. And that has disappeared with a distributed workforce, because we talk on Teams, but we talk directly to the person we want to speak to. And there's never that just odd chance conversation. And that's where we're trying to learn a way of ways to bring that back. And that's one of the reasons that I was interested in Huddlecraft, is to give me ideas about how we can approach that and how we can try to reintroduce that culture. And I liked what Aisha said about when somebody has an idea that's different to what the group think is, instead of hissing at them and disregarding them, is to go, it's not you're wrong. It's why do you think that way, and not in a pejorative way, but in a why do you think that way? I'm really interested. What have we missed that you haven't?
There's a humility almost to that, isn't it? That openness of like, we've all got stuff to learn from each other's perspectives, a different way of doing things.
But it is amazing how much that can change your own mindset on things that, there's been people in my organization that I've had initially butted heads with and had that thought of, God, they really wind me up. Until I've gone, okay, well, let's look at it from their perspective and let's ask them what their view is. And all of a sudden you find yourself getting along with that person because you understand why they think the way they do, but also it can open up you to different ways of thinking as well. So as I said, Aisha had covered quite a bit of that, but yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Matt. And I'm going to pause us there because I want to give you a coffee break before we move into looking at some of the Huddlecraft methodology. And so some of the things you've been speaking to, those kind of tools and techniques for enabling some of this way of being, we'll be looking at after the break. So let's come back at 5 past, and I'm going to open up a breakout room. So if you want to grab your coffee, then come and join a breakout room and chat to people. There'll be a coffee room open. So do whatever you need to do, and see you at 5 past. We're going to come back together. So when you're able to rejoin, if you just pop your cameras on, if you're able to, so we know that you're here. All right, welcome back. And before we move into the next section, I'm just going to invite you to do a little stretch if that feels good for you in your body. You might want to invite a little bit of movement into your shoulders. We've been doing lots of sitting, looking at a screen so far this morning. So just invite you to do whatever feels good for your body. I want to do some head rolls. I'm a big fan of a head roll. So yeah, just invite yourself to give your body a little bit of movement and TLC in a way that feels good for you. It's so easy for us to forget to do this with remote working and online experiences. We can forget that we're not just heads on a square, but we've also got bodies. So yeah, inviting you to connect with yours in whatever way feels good for you. And Zara, I will hand back to you.
Thank you, Kate. That was needed. So now for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to talk a little bit more about our methodology and give you essentially a framework and maybe a tool or two, some examples that will hopefully feel tangible that you can take away, and there'll be some space as well to reflect on how it connects to your own work. So here are those slides. So yeah, I'm going to talk through our 5-level framework, which we affectionately refer to as the snail. And this is deliberately described, visualized as a spiral, because we like to think of fractals within our work. So I don't know whether that is a familiar concept to everyone, but essentially that the dynamics that show up at the smallest scale will also show up at the larger scale. So this snail framework takes us from the first level, which is the self, through pairs, groups, interventions, and then looking at the whole wider ecosystem. So we're going from the smaller scale to the larger scale. And yeah, we think it's important to address the dynamics at that smaller scale so that they can be replicated as we spiral out. So we'll start by looking at the self. And the way that we think about this is that the self is the core ingredient of any peer group. So peer groups are just groups of people and made up of people and the way that they interact. And so the interactions that happen between people will also happen as a result of the capabilities and capacities of the individuals as well, and how they are able to relate to others. And because in peer-led approaches, the individuals are no passively digesting learning from a teacher or, from a screen, that passivity or lack of it in this case means that the way they relate to others becomes more important, and their motivation to be there and to be learning matters more. And so we really think a lot about self-awareness and building that, and the different roles that individuals can play within groups, and how individuals can switch effectively between roles, going from teacher to learner to antagonist and so on. And so we're going to do a little exercise with role cards. So this is a tool that we use quite often at Huddlecraft. And the role cards have 12 different archetypes or roles that we tend to see show up in different ways in different peer groups. And we have a link that Kate will share in the chat. And we'd love for you to just take a couple of minutes to have a flick through and a look through the different roles, and then to share with us when you're ready in the chat one role that you usually play. So which one of these is your default position? So for me, that tends to be defaulting into the rock position here, so being dependable. And then one role that you would like to challenge yourself to play more. So often I feel I want to challenge myself to play the antagonist role more, and to be provoking and questioning. So have a look through and then tell us in the chat what those two are for you. And I'm going to stop sharing actually while we do that so I can see the chat responses.
And I will play a little song while you do this in the background.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Jonathan, for sharing. Needing to lean more into the equalizer, non-judgmental, nice. Madeleine, I like the idea of playing the nurturer and the intensifier at the same time. That sounds like a wild mix. Great, thank you everyone for sharing. Yeah, and I think this is interesting because it shows how, people have really different natural roles just within this group of us online, and you want to lean into sort of almost the opposite things as one another. And so one way that we like to use this tool with a group at the start of their working together is to ask people which role they want to take on for the duration of a huddle. And sometimes challenge people for that to be the role they want to lean into rather than the role they default to. Wonderful, thank you everyone. Keep sharing if you'd like to and you haven't yet. And I'm gonna move us on.
And again, we'll share those roll cards in the pack that we sent around after today, so you can play with them in your settings with your teams if you like to.
Yeah, that would be great. And we love to hear how people have used those things and how they've worked with them in different ways than the way that we work with them as well, because then we learn. So then moving on to pairs. So the next section of the spiral. So we feel that groups and communities are built on the strength of their smaller units. So whether that's self or whether it's pairs. And we think pairs are a really interesting unit to focus a lot of attention on, because there are so many different models for how pairs can structure their relationship and make it really purposeful and really effective. And of course, you will all be aware of all of these already, you know, from mentoring relationships, coaching relationships, counseling relationships, buddying, so the kind of peer coaching as well. All of these different ways of structuring pairs are sort of unnatural in a sense, because they're not you and your mate in a pub having a chat. You're imposing structure onto a one-to-one relationship in a way that means you can achieve a certain thing. And all of those examples that I've given have slightly different power relationships and ways of engaging with power. So with mentoring, you know, there might be a distinct sense that someone is bringing expertise and someone is learning. And in a peer buddyship, it might be more sort of on an equal footing than that. We find in our work that coaching and peer coaching specifically is a great underpinning tool to use for huddles. So we do quite a lot of coaching training with our hosts and with groups that we work with, because we find that the skills of coaching just seem to really well underpin all of the peer relationships that we're trying to create. And so I showed you this image before, and we use different kinds of pairs in different ways within this ecosystem of people that we work with. So the host mentors, the people in the squares out in their different parts of this ecosystem, they are working in partnership in a pair with each of the hosts who starts a huddle. And that is a blend of mentoring and coaching in that relationship. And then the host, whilst they are working with a huddle as a group, they are also having sometimes a one-to-one coaching relationship with members of that group as well. And sometimes members of the group are buddied with one another too. So lots of different pairs show up within our work, and we practice that. And then moving around to groups. So this is sort of the center of the spiral, and is definitely the heart of our work, working with peer groups. And in general, this is the way that we work with groups. So there are some characteristics that typically make up a huddle. So I know there was some chat about this in the chat earlier on, ideally 12 people maximum. And that's because we think that when there are no more than 12 people, everyone can remember everyone else, and everyone can know when they're in the space or in a meeting if someone isn't there. I'm going to notice if you're not there, and therefore the accountability and the stickiness of that is greater than in a larger group where I can duck out and no one will know that I'm not there. I also think beyond 12, it becomes an unfathomable number of relationships that can occur within that group. Can be too much value for people to navigate. It's important that there's a defined purpose of some kind, again, to reduce some of the potential complexity of working in this way. Peer groups are always sharing resources and support. And I think when we say resources, we have a really broad definition of that. A resource might just be someone's different perspective than yours, or a resource might be that one person is, like someone was saying in the chat just now, they're a brilliant maker and they always default to making. And so by doing that, they can model a way of working that can encourage other members of the group to work in that way too. Importantly, everyone in the group should feel some responsibility for it. And that's where the role cards are helpful as well, because you're designating people a role that they must take on and hold. And within huddles, we do things like having a structure where every person in that group will be hosting a workshop within it or one of the meetings. And that's important because it is that harder accountability and a way of structuring in that shared responsibility. And then, yeah, multi-directional relationships. So there are multiple relationships. I think there's over 100 relationships that can be happening within a 12-person group. So there's a lot of potential value there that can be used for learning, support, well-being, action, behavior change, collaboration, entertainment even. You know, this can just be used for play as well. And yeah, I think we really focus on groups because a lot of the time there's a big emphasis, especially in change spaces, but also in learning spaces as well, on large groups. And large groups are powerful, right? There are lots of unique characteristics of large groups or networks of people, but often the specific unique characteristics of small groups are really overlooked and underrated. And we look at research from Damon Centola, which is all about how actually in a network where there are loose ties between people, not strong relationships, that's a great way to pass simple pieces of information. So your tweet or, you know, your couple of sentences or your headline, that can pass really easily in non-trusting loose relationships. But when it comes to changing behavior or moving something a lot more complex between people, you need closer trusting relationships in order to pass those. And that's where small groups are really powerful. So we focus on groups, but we also think about how that can be used for strategic aims as well. This is a really great example of the power of the small scale. So don't try and read the slide. I will read it to you. So this is an example of a housing project, which was a famous failure in the history of US public housing. So as you can see in the image, there was a complex with lots of big identical buildings, each of which fit 100 families, so many, many people in each building. And each building had a floor that was specifically for community activity. But after just 1 year, after just a couple of years, 90% occupancy had gone down to 35% occupancy. And so a professor went along to find out why, and he found the units vandalized. And the expectation or the assumption from a lot of people looking at this was that the residents should be blamed for this. Why are they vandalizing their communal spaces? But then what this professor observed was that there was another project just next door where the houses were kept really, really well. And it was exactly the same demographic of people who were living there. But the difference was that in the other project, there were just a few families who were living around one small communal space. And so the scale just simply meant that people were able to know their neighbours, build relationships with their neighbours, build accountability with their neighbours, and manage their own small community in a way that was really fruitful. And so the real learning there for US public housing was that when you take things to a scale that is such that people cannot hold it and comprehend it, then it can break down and it won't have the outcomes that they're looking for. So then we move on to the intervention layer. And I've sort of started talking about this already, because this is really where, if you think about the power of a small group, how can you then think about lots of small groups and what that might achieve at a larger strategic level? So if you have goals in your work, if you have targets, strategic outcomes that you're trying to meet, this layer of the framework is all about how can you use peer-to-peer relating and dynamics to fuel those goals and make them happen. And I think we very much started as an organization working with peer learning to achieve outcomes for individuals. And over time, we have developed so that we're now often working on social environmental impact outcomes as well. And Kate is going to give you an example of Money Movers, which is the project I mentioned earlier, which demonstrates this quite well. And Kate, if you tell me next slide, I can move on.
Thank you, Zara. Yeah, so Money Movers started as a partnership program between Friends of the Earth and Huddlecraft, and has now evolved. It is now called Money Movers, but you might have come across it in its early days called Own It. And as Zara's already mentioned, Money Movers is all about getting women to move their money for the planet. Next slide, please. And really, this was a response to a very big challenge and this kind of question of how can we make it simpler to take climate action with our personal finances? And this idea of that, for so many people, but particularly women, it can be harder to access the world of finance. It can be harder to seek support. The information is there, but it's sort of deliberately dressed up in language that sort of keeps certain people or certain groups out of it. And so the idea with the Money Movers project was, how can we find a way for people to gather with their friends or their colleagues and to use the power of peer support to take climate action with their finances? And it works in a very simple way. Next slide, please. So we're using Zara as an example. So Zara signs up and trains as a Money Movers host. So Zara is the host of a Money Movers group, and she gathers around 5 women from her work or her life and hosts just 3 Money Movers sessions. The sessions already exist. Zara has learned about how to run those sessions during Money Movers training. And then the group gather for those 3 sessions and they take some actions to measure impact. So they decide, what are the actions I want to take with my finances? What's the amount of money that I'm planning to move, for example, by divesting my pension? But the key thing is that as Money Movers, there is not, it's not directive. It's not, here's the bank that you should bank with, here's the pension that you should pick. There's a real focus on the peer group doing their own learning, their own research, their own sharing of resources and ideas with each other to then identify the actions that those individuals want to take. Next slide, please. So far, £1.2 million has been moved by 140 women. 28% of those women moved their bank account, 20% moved their pension, 20% made an ethical investment, and crucially, 100% of those women feel more able to take action with their finances. So yes, this is about the tangible action that is taken and the money that is being divested away from fossil fuels and towards greener energy and more environmentally sustainable solutions. But there's also this more nuanced, I guess, or less tangible sense of women feeling more able to take action with their finances, which is massive, and obviously then leads to further action that they're able to take in their lives around their finances and other areas. Next slide, please. And so now there's this really ambitious target for Money Movers, and the Money Movers organisation is trying to move £1 billion by 2030 through the power of peer groups. And so there's another kind of host of community groups being set up and training as Money Movers hosts. There are also some partnerships between Money Movers and corporate partners. So people like Deloitte have been running this inside their organisations. And so you can see here, this is where there is a really strategic goal with a very tangible financial outcome, but peer groups is the way to achieve that goal. So the power of peer groups is what is enabling people to take that action with their money. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Is there anything else you would say, Zara, about Money Movers?
Yeah, I mean, just one reflection while you were sharing that, I think that idea of different network structures and loose ties versus sort of clusters of strong relationships, I think Money Movers is very complementary to other things that are going on in the climate finance space, like Make My Money Matter, which is much more about information giving. So that's a campaign that is trying to spread the message that we have agency with our money. We can take climate action with our money. Not everyone realizes how powerful that can be, and that those actions can be 21 times more impactful than completely stopping flying, for example. So they are, spreading that message. And then Money Movers is kind of coming into that space essentially with a mechanism for helping people go from, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, to I've actually moved my money. And I think that's what peer-to-peer can do really well.
And just to say very briefly, I was working on the Money Movers program through another kind of avenue of work, and felt so excited by it that I ended up signing up as a host myself and ran my own peer group. And it genuinely was phenomenal what became possible in that group of women just through gathering around a table, having a conversation about finances. And I think it speaks to that point that Holly made at the very start, that what we're talking about here is not rocket science, and yet it can be so hard to do in practice without the conditions and the structures and the enabling functionality that can enable people to gather and connect around a particular purpose. And Zara, just a flag as you move into ecosystem, because I feel it's relevant to that. Some people are sharing in the chat, really curious to hear more about NHS organisations that are working in this way and thinking about some of the barriers to this work. So I don't know if you want to kind of speak to that as you're talking about some of the ecosystem, things around power and context, just bringing that in.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, great. Yeah, so the final layer of the snail then is the ecosystem. And this is all about thinking about the context that you are implementing peer-to-peer stuff within. And so, yeah, if you are in an NHS organisation and you were thinking about how to achieve some of your objectives through a peer-led approach, this would be thinking about the wider organisation that you're embedded in, the trends, the things that are happening in the wider organization and how they're going to impact on you and the intervention that you're trying to make happen. And so we use another nature analogy here, which we often find helpful, of what's in the water. And we use that analogy to think about the ecosystem or context that we're living, working, implementing something within. And it's a useful analogy because when you're in the water, you can't see the water. And there might be currents around you impacting on you, moving you, that you can't visibly, tangibly see. And we feel that that's helpful because that's quite reflective of some of the currents that you might be encountering, which also aren't visible in that tangible, in front of your eyes kind of way. So the power dynamics in your organization, the cultural norms and trends, the institutional structures, the governance that means that certain things can't change or are very, very difficult to change, attitudes that people hold. All of these different things are currents that are going to affect the way that we design and implement interventions. Some of these currents are going to be more powerful than others and harder to change or shift. And some of them we might feel could be possible for us to actually change them. You know, like cultural norms might feel like something you can change more so than power dynamics potentially, or institutional structures. And the tool, or the sort of the prompt that we often use for mapping the ecosystem is to think about where you are swimming with the currents, and or where those currents might actually be helping you towards your goal, and where might you be swimming against the currents, or where are the currents actually actively in your way, preventing you from doing what you want to do. And really this level of the framework is about mapping, understanding, bringing in more perspectives, expanding your view of the ecosystem, of what's in the water, so that you're better equipped to design and implement your intervention. And in a breakout room that I was in earlier, you know, we were talking about how some people are doers and some people like to reflect and go on reflecting and keep reflecting. And I think that can be a danger with this layer of, well, we still don't know everything, so we keep mapping, we keep understanding. And so we like to think of a sort of a 10% more rule of thumb with this, where this is about expanding our understanding 10%, and then we need to take action and learn that way as well. And so that sort of brings us around the whole framework. That's a whistle-stop tour, really, just dipping a toe, and something to take away and play with. So these role cards will follow up with these, and yeah, to reiterate the invitation, how might you use these cards to distribute power and responsibility within a team or a project, or within your organization? We will share some more public resources. I think Kate will share a link where you can find some more of our things. And we also have this deeper training, this deeper immersion that follows the same framework, but actually goes into it across 7 sessions. And we run that twice a year, as I mentioned in the rhythms as well. And that's it.
Thank you, Zara. But yeah, we'll open it out to questions. I just wanted to pick up this piece in the chat around some of the challenges and barriers to embedding this way of working. And we talked about this a lot on the NHS Southwest Academy leadership training. You know, the first we had 3 days together. The first day everyone was like, whoa, this is brilliant. The second day everyone was like, wait, how will we actually do it? And then the third day people were like, okay, I can sort of see a way forward. And I think one of the key kind of messages that came through, and Holly, I'm curious to hear whether you've got additional thoughts on this, was this idea that the change that you see through working this peer-to-peer way doesn't need to be a whole organizational, transformational cultural change. The shift that you can start seeing how people are connecting with each other and shifting to more of a peer-to-peer way of working. It might be how a discussion happens in a team meeting. It might be how a team meeting begins. It might be how a decision is made around one particular project. And sometimes I think when we learn about techniques like this, it can feel like we need to transform everything in order for it to be working. And actually, I think a really important thing here is understanding the micro ways you can embed a peer-to-peer approach without feeling you need to redesign the entire NHS system. And Holly, I'm curious how that lands for you and whether you want to add anything around that.
Yeah, I think it's it's about finding the thing that starts to bring energy, because actually when you're struggling, that's the thing that everybody lacks. And I'm pretty sure that everybody here who's working in the NHS or with the NHS will appreciate that draining feeling. And I think, you know, if you can find that one thing that sparks energy, it's a movement, and it's contagious. So, you know, I think giving people a platform to be able to express their ideas, challenges, as Matt was talking about earlier, that's all you actually have to do to start a revolution. And then it's the people that make it happen. It's not the structures, it's not the organisation, it's the people.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you so much. And Zara, anything you want to add to that piece around barriers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that to sort of build on what Holly just said, I think peer-to-peer stuff is actually about expecting more of people in a lot of ways, like not necessarily expecting sort of more hours doing something, but expecting more agency and more responsibility. And that can be a barrier, especially when people are very used to their way of working within a hierarchical organization, for example. That can be a real shift. But I think, like you said, Kate, it can be a shift that can be done in very small ways and very slowly, so that people can feel some of the reward of that. And I think doing it sort of top down or telling people we're now going to work in a peer-to-peer way can almost be the worst way of going about doing that, because what you need to do is do something different, do a little experiment, have people reflect on that, share what they found rewarding or fruitful about that way of working, and, you know, create their own buy-in, I think, essentially. I think doing buy-in to other people just never works.
Yeah, thank you, Zara. Very interesting. We're moving towards kind of the final part of the visit, and I want to give you some time to share kind of reactions and thoughts with each other. But I want to also give you some time to kind of consolidate first. So I'm going to drop some questions in the chat. You might want to use your curiosity canvas to do this. You might want to just make some notes in your notebook, whatever works for you. And you don't have to respond to all the questions. Just as Holly said, go where the energy is. But what ideas has this sparked for your own work? What questions are you leaving with? And what is one thing you want to share, and with who? And I'm just going to give you a minute on your own before we open this out into the group, just a minute to reflect on that. And when you're ready, feel free to finish the note you're scribbling or the sentiment you're capturing. And we've got about 10 minutes now to just open this out to the group and to share some of those reflections, what's surfacing in terms of ideas or questions or actions you want to take away. So I'd love to open it up to the group to hear from some of you. Who would like to kick us off?
I don't mind.
Thank you, Matt.
There's a few things that I liked the idea of, and a few things that I want to look into a little more. I like the idea of the learn 10% more and then act on it, that I think Zara mentioned, because my team are constantly learning about processes within the organization and how to improve them. And we tend to want to get all of the information that we can possibly wring out of it before we actually take a step. And that's part of, you know, the business analysis side of things. But there is a value to jumping forward with what information you've got, because there's a tendency to sit in inaction, waiting for more knowledge to land. And I like the idea of learn 10%, then move forward. and then you can always learn more after that move forward. So that's a good takeaway. I liked the bit about the sessions for the on Thursdays. You have your, I can't even read the notes I've written here. So.
Is that the practice sessions or the learning hour?
Yeah, 3 worky wibs it says here. Basically, the check in and check out, and telling each other about your personal wins, your working wins, challenge, and weekend plans at the end of the week. I think I might instigate that with my team. And I liked the idea of the open learning hour, because we have Fridays. Is largely our automation day, where we learn about what we can do with automation, but it's quite unstructured for the team. And I like the idea of having them plan ahead of what they're going to learn on that day, and then present to the rest of the team what they've learned, instead of it just being sort of internalized for them. And that way we can share knowledge a lot more. And the only other thing, sorry, I don't want to take up everybody's time because there's a lot of people here to speak, is I would like to know more from Holly about reporting, because you said when people were doing, I think, RCAs on their what had happened in the care home, and you turn that into an empowering activity rather than something to dread. And I'd love to hear more about how you went about that, because we have, obviously things like that in our organisation that are very challenging, and to turn it into a positive is a real achievement. So. And
maybe, Holly, I don't know if you just want to say kind of a sentence on that now, and then maybe the two of you, if you want to connect elsewhere, that might be a conversation you want to pick up. But yeah, just say a line or so on that.
What the intervention we introduced was cluster debriefs. So in fact, instead of having to air your dirty laundry in front of an audience, some of whom you may not have trust with, we actually did that on a smaller scale and debriefed incidences before we actually then formulated a systematic response to what we did, which is what's supposed to happen, I think. But actually the experience of the colleagues' significant event reporting before had felt, I think, sometimes like Dragon's Den. So sort of reversing that culture. So I'm more than happy to talk to you more about how that happens in practice.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Maybe we can swap emails. In fact, I'll open that up to everybody. If my email can be made public to everybody, I'll drop it into the chat. Anybody,
feel free to do that. And just a reminder that in the pre-visit pack, you've got a list of everyone who'd signed up to this visit and a link to their Q profiles. So if there's people you've connected with in breakout rooms, you can also seek each other out after this. So I
did sign up quite late to this this meeting, so I'm not actually in that pack.
Okay, great.
So
well, then
I'll pop it into the.
Feel free to do that. All good. Thank you,
Can
Matt.
I just ask that you put something in the subject, like huddle, if you put huddle in the subject, so it doesn't get caught by my external spam filter.
Love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love to hear. We've probably got time to hear from a couple more people. What else is resonating for people? What's sparking? What questions are surfacing for you? Actions you're thinking of taking? We'd love to hear from a couple of others.
It's Aisha. Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, I like the cards. I think it can be a good start. So we do have regular MDT meetings, and perhaps it's something that without even introducing the idea of peer-to-peer or anything, just start putting them through the experiments and discovering each one's, skills, and it will actually be well aligned to what we are doing now. So we are introducing health coaching as part of our routine consultations. So the coaching mindset is there, the team freshly trained in having coaching conversations, perhaps using that card first to discover what skills we have, each one of us, and also what do we want to develop as skills, and then using the peer coaching conversations to help each other develop in those skills. I think probably is something that I'm just trying to take home from this fantastic meeting, really. And the other thing as well, probably I would like to learn more about is the money mover. projects, because in the trust we have like climate change strategy within the transformation team. So it's perhaps an idea that we can test in few departments and see if we can scale it up.
Yeah, great. Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll share information. We'll share the roll cards and we'll share the Money Movers link in.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Unless there's anything from anyone else, we've got a couple more things to do before we close.
Could I?
Oh yeah, Karen.
Sorry, I don't want to. Yeah, I was just wondering. I really like the idea of this movement building way of doing things differently. Lots and lots of people thinking about the same way to shift systems along to something better. So I'm wondering about. I mean, for you guys, how do you sustain this as a practice? Because obviously you're, I guess, employed or trying to do this as full-time jobs, and therefore that requires resourcing for you. How does that work in movement building? And also how do how do those ideas, so those ideas aren't held by a particular way of doing things. They're kind of they're becoming increasingly distributed across lots and lots and lots of different streams, and how do we support the people who are putting the hard work and energy into creating those ideas? How do we support those when it becomes increasingly like mass movement? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that, or are you just working in that field and hoping for the best?
Zara, I'll let you come back on that, but just to say very briefly, I think there's something for me, since I got involved with Huddlecraft, which was back in 2017, there's elements of peer-to-peer in all aspects of my life now, which I'm not sure there would have been before. And I think that there's the word that comes to mind is there's something around the mutuality. Is that even a word? Have I made that up? Is that a word?
Yeah, sure.
It's fine. But I think there's something about because of the mutual benefit of people who are getting involved, whether it's like the WhatsApp group I have for people in my city so we can connect because we're all new to the area, or it's something around my practice as a facilitator, there is a mutual benefit to all of those who are involved, which in my experience means people are much less precious about who owns the ideas, who started it, who brought a particular thing to the table, because there's a sense of kind of community and mutuality to it. That's part of the spirit, I suppose, part of the ethos. That's just one thought, but Zara, I'll let you come back on that as well.
Yeah, and there's a reflection that came up just now, sort of listening to some of you share back, which is that peer-to-peer is not an ideology, or like that's not what we're trying to do at all. It can be really hard to describe the methodology and the way that we're working without it sounding like, peer-to-peer is something that you have to kind of ascribe to or buy into, but actually, it's just made up of a lot of simple techniques and structures that can be experimented with, applied, broken down, use part of it. And so that idea of it kind of spreading out is definitely what we're trying to achieve, really, I would say, is to kind of ripple that out and help people to use those approaches. I think there's like a business question there, which is that, when we do training and we are continually essentially skilling other people up in what we do, are we like undercutting our own ability to survive? But actually, if that is where we ended up, then maybe that's not a bad thing, because then we've achieved what we're trying to do somehow. And just to the first part of your question, just to clarify, was that almost what's our business model? Like, how do we resource our work? Or maybe you can just say a bit more.
Without being too personal, I'm just wondering about, I'm just thinking that it seems like this stuff is very valuable and it's being brought in and created very valuable. And I've been a little bit guilty within Plymouth of going, this thing is amazing, drag it in from the inside. People in Plymouth, you should be getting involved in this. And then partly people like figuring out their own solutions themselves. So they're a bit nervous of having something brought in and brought down. But also, I guess, I think what Kate was saying, because there's a desire to make a movement and to change this stuff, there is less preciousness about holding on to the ideas. But I suppose I'm just thinking about, how do you value that? How do you value the work that you guys have done and the intensive amount of online resources without just going, "Tara, very much, I'll have these," grabbing them off, not seeing you again?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. Actually, it feels refreshing. I mean, I think there are various ways, really practically and tangibly, that we value our work. So in offering training that people can pay to take part in, whether they're individuals or organizations, who want to do that for their whole team. Then the way that we work with hosts who start huddles is that they pay Huddlecraft for training, support, mentorship, license agreement, brand, tools, everything they need to kind of start from where we've got to, as opposed to from a blank page. And then they can create an income or some income through their huddle. And then we work with organizations as well. And so again, where they might want to do something quickly, or something that might be that they might feel they don't have all of the skills or experience in their team already to implement, we might be a good partner for that, and they would pay us for our input into that work, because we kind of, we have the experience that we can bring, and we also have the network of people who have lots of experience, so we can kind of form different teams and different clusters around different challenges. But yeah, ultimately it's human stuff, isn't it? It's like relating. And so it has to be about spreading that and not trying to own it.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you, Zara. We are going to do 2 more things in the last 5 minutes. I'm going to share my screen with you and invite you to get your phones out, and we're going to do a quick Mentimeter feedback. You can do this on your laptops if you want, but it's often much easier to do it on your phone if you've got your phone to hand. And I'm going to invite you to go to menti.com, menti.com, and use the code that you can see on the screen. And just to share a word about how you're feeling at the end of this visit. Thank you. You can see them coming in. And if you've put your word in, you can enjoy the shapes shifting as more and more people contribute on the screen. I always find that highly pleasing. Just give you space. There's a couple more of you to respond. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing, but if you're still submitting your word, don't worry, it will still come through. And then there's one other thing we're going to do, which is I'm going to share a link in the chat for a short feedback survey. So you may or may not be aware that this is a kind of fresh programme of visits, and this is the second of that fresh programme that we've done. So it's really helpful for us to understand the value of the visits, the impact, what you liked, what you want us to tweak next time. So there's a survey and the link in the chat, and I'd love it if you could take the next 3 minutes we have now to respond to that it's done, you don't have to think about it. If you do have to shoot off because you've got a 12 o'clock meeting, we'll send it round this afternoon as well, but would really value that feedback. And just before you open that link and you do that, a couple of thank yous to share. So big thank you to Zara and to Huddlecraft for hosting this visit. It's been really interesting and inspiring to get a dive into your organisation. And a big thank you to Holly as well, who cancelled that important chairing and came to us instead. So thank you so much for coming along and sharing your expertise. Thank you for the feedback on the survey. Probably need to open it, don't I? I'll do that right now. So hang on to your hats while I do that. And then, yeah, you should be able to open it up and respond. Thank you so much, everyone. And really look forward to seeing you at a future event. We've got a couple more coming up in the immediate future, the next of which is an in-person visit at Bromley by Bow Centre. So we'll send that round as well after today. So if you're interested in signing up to that, you can. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.